If you've ever had a test fail using Selenium WebDriver because an element cannot be found, you know how frustrating that can be. And that may be due to a timeout issue. The way we handle timeouts in Selenium is by using waits. And there are two main types of waits, implicit waits and explicit waits. Under explicit waits, we have two main subcategories, and those are WebDriver wait and Fluent wait. Today we're going to discuss how we can use WebDriver waits to make our tests more reliable. Welcome to automateNow. I'm Marco Cruz. Let's dive in.
Let's see what the Selenium website has to say about explicit waits. And it says here that they allow the code to hold program execution or freeze the thread until the condition you pass it resolves. We're going to see what this condition is in a second. The condition is called with a certain frequency until the timeout of the wait is elapsed. And what this is basically saying is that we're willing to wait a given amount of time for a certain condition to be met. And what is that condition, you ask? Let's scroll down here. Selenium provides an expected conditions class, and these are some of the expected conditions that you can wait for. We can wait for alerts, for an element to exist, for an element to be visible, and so on. Now let's go to the code to see an example of an explicit wait. And here we have a method that we wrote in the Intro to Selenium WebDriver video series. And this says that it's waiting for an element text. And notice that here we're creating a WebDriverWait object with a default timeout of 3 seconds. And then we pass in the expected condition that we're looking for. And in this case, we're waiting for a specific text. Notice that this method requires that you pass in an element locator, along with the text that you expect that element to have. Let's go to automateNow.io. Here we have this element. This is a span element, and this is the text that it contains. So when I call that method, I would have to pass in the locator for this element, along with this text here. And this is the key difference between an explicit wait and an implicit wait that we learned in the previous video. We learned that an implicit wait allows us to wait a given amount of time for any element on a page. But with an explicit wait, we're waiting for a specific element. Going back to the definition for explicit wait here, it says that the condition is called with a certain frequency until the timeout of the wait is elapsed. Well, we know what the condition is for this method here. We said that the condition here is waiting for the element to have a given text. We also know the timeout, and the timeout that we specified here is 3 seconds. So we're going to wait up to 3 seconds for that element to have that given text. Please keep in mind that even though we're setting a duration of 3 seconds in this explicit wait, it doesn't mean that our tests are going to stop for the entire 3 seconds. If it happens to find the element text after only 1 second, then the test will continue execution right away. It will not wait the whole 3 seconds or even 30 seconds if we had used 30 seconds instead. The last piece here says that the condition is called with a certain frequency. Let's find out what that frequency is. If we go back to the method here, we're going to take a look at this WebDriverWait here. We're going to hold Control and click WebDriverWait. And notice that we're passing the WebDriver and the timeout. We can see here that this is calling another method. And aside from the driver and the timeout, we see a duration here, 500 milliseconds. And this is the part that keeps polling the DOM every 500 milliseconds for that text to be present in that element. Let's Control click on this here. And here we can see that it's going to wait the given amount of time that we provide, and then it's going to poll the DOM every 500 milliseconds. It is also going to ignore any exceptions from the not found exception class, such as no such element. So really, this is just going to keep polling the DOM. If the element is not found, it's not going to throw an exception. It's just going to run until the timeout expires. And then if it still doesn't find the element, it's just going to throw a timeout exception. Now, to see this explicit wait in action, let's go ahead and run a test that we have written in the past in the Intro to Selenium WebDriver video series. Here we have this test called Test Prompt Popup. And let's go to automateNow.io. If we go to the sandbox page, here we have this button here called Prompt Popup. If we click this button, we see an alert come up. And it's asking us to enter our name. So I'm just going to type my name here. And when I click OK, I see this message displayed on the screen. So if we go back to the test, we're basically setting this name in that alert. And then we click the OK button, and then we wait for this text to appear on the screen. Nice to meet you, and whatever name we put in. If we inspect this method here called wait for prompt popup result, we're going to see that it's calling the wait for element text, this one here. So we're using this explicit wait here to wait for this text to appear. Now let's go ahead and run this test to see what happens. And there's no point of me running this test with the text that I expect to find. Instead, I'm going to force this test to fail by entering some different text. And here I'm just going to mistype the word U and add an extra U here. Now I should expect this test to fail when I run it. Let's go ahead and do that. And I ran this test in real time so that you could see how the test paused for 3 seconds while it waited for the text to appear on the screen. Obviously the test failed, as we can see here. And if we scroll down here in this console log, we're going to see a timeout exception that we talked about. And it says here that it failed on the expected condition. We were waiting for some text to appear, this text here, "Nice to meet you, Marco," but instead we found this text here that has this typo. If you would like to learn more about this type of explicit wait, please visit the link in the video description. In the next video, we're going to talk about another type of explicit wait, and that is called a fluent wait.